All right, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. I think we're going to have a whole bunch of people trickling in. I think the keynotes started late and went late, but just to be able to stay on schedule, we'll go ahead and get started right now. My name is Dieter Schuler. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Radiant Logic. What I'd like to do this morning is introduce Cory Plastek from Asurion and talk a little bit about mergers and acquisitions and the opportunity and the challenges that you get when you do any kind of a merger or even a change in organization, and what that means for the stakeholders and the shareholders and the executives of an organization. So when you do an acquisition, one of the things that the shareholders are looking to is how fast can you get the synergies that we've promised the street from this acquisition. And if your business model is to do acquisitions all the time, you've got to put in place something that is predictable, that will allow people from these acquired companies to get access to your resources almost immediately, and potentially vice versa. If you're moving to the cloud, that makes it even more acute. And when you talk to Microsoft, one of the things they'll tell you is, well, you got to do a Active Directory domain consolidation, which is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects for some of these large organizations. So what Cory's going to talk about is how they've used identity virtualization to address some of these challenges and opportunities. I'll bring Cory up, turn it over to him. We'll kind of go through what they've done and what they're thinking about, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Like Dieter mentioned, my name's Cory Plastek. I'm from Asurion. We'll go over a few things today, mostly focused on our challenges with our complex, unnecessarily complex in some cases, Active Directory environment, and how we solved some of those problems we were having or met those challenges with a Radiant One. So we'll go over, if you're not familiar with Asurion, I'll explain who Asurion is and maybe why it makes sense in this case. Who am I to speak about these things? We'll go over Asurion's Active Directory state and what led us to the point where we needed a directory virtualization product. Some of the issues and workarounds that we had initially, and then go over some customizations that we did that made sense for our implementation. And then finally I'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers. If you have questions, or more specifically, you can come up and talk to me afterwards. Asurion has 290 million customers globally. We function largely as an insurance provider. If you go to your cell phone carrier and ask for insurance on a cell phone or a tablet or a device, usually it's us in the back end. Those carriers white label our products, and we help them provide those services they couldn't provide themselves. We have major customers in North America, South America, Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, and offices all over the world. My name's Cory Plastek, like I mentioned earlier. I am a directory services and authentication architect. My domain specifically is Active Directory. We're a large Microsoft shop. Our directory management tools and authentication, single sign-on, and web access management. So let's go over, I'll explain our Active Directory state a little bit. We have 13 Active Directory domains in 12 forests, a little unnecessarily complex. When an employee is hired, they get at least 2 accounts. One account in their login domain, and then an account in our Exchange resource forest. So at a minimum, we're starting off with 2 accounts right off the bat. Now, they may be provisioned additional accounts if they needed access to individual applications that only utilize or leverage one domain, and it didn't happen to be their primary domain. So they may get 3 accounts or 4 accounts. And then they have a need to log into applications on their domains. That's the whole point of provisioning them additional accounts. Typically, they're logging into an account in one of our 3 primary domains, and then they're accessing applications in that domain or tied to another domain, but I think you get the idea. And then groups, we have two-way trust in place in most of our environment, so they're going to be able to leverage trust, and we want them to be able to leverage trust where possible, so that groups in one domain can include members in another domain. So I stole this slide from Radiant, but it really does highlight exactly what it looked like in Asurion to develop or deploy a new application. We had application developers, you need to connect to at least maybe one directory, and then if you need to support maybe a specific business segment or users that were provisioned specifically in another directory, then you need to support at least those 2 directories. And then maybe they have this other database they need to reach out to get additional user information or context. So it doesn't scale well. And you can imagine it's a nightmare if we were to then bring on another company, do another merger. We now need to go to every application owner and say, oh, hey, sorry, we have this 3rd directory. You have 2 already, I know, but I need you to integrate with this 3rd directory as well. Completely different credentials that you're used to using. So just let us know when you can go ahead and do that. Wasn't a great use case, especially when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of applications. It just doesn't work. So part of our Active Directory state led to what are the issues that we saw with provisioning multiple accounts, and what did that look like? So because I mentioned users may use applications outside the primary domain. That's the whole point of having domain trust. However, applications that authenticate and authorize based on LDAP can typically only look at a single LDAP tree. You're looking at a single root and then all users and groups under that root. And this is rare, if that application has been built to support multiple LDAP directories, the behavior when you have collisions is inconsistent. We had some applications where they would, someone would type in their username and it would find an account for them in one domain. It would attempt to log them in, it would fail. Okay, that's expected, but it's not expected when you don't know which domain is first in that list. It also has issues because, let's say they do a search maybe across one or multiple directories if it's been written that way, and it returns multiple results. Sometimes the application just kind of gives up. It says, I don't know what to do, throws up its hands and says, you can't log in. That's not a great end user experience. For these extra or duplicate accounts we had to provision in other domains, specifically for that application to have access, it's really, really confusing for the end user, and it also means that there's a much larger overhead on the identity professional to manage those extra accounts. So now when you're looking at logs to see, okay, who's doing what, now you need to know, well, it's not just this one account for this person. They could be using this one account over here, and then 5 minutes later be using another account somewhere else. It means you now need to correlate that activity. It isn't always straightforward, especially if you don't. In our case, we're fortunate. We have most of our users are from a common HR system. We have a unique identifier for 95% of our users, but it does mean that you have to go at least do 1 or maybe 2 lookups to make sure you know exactly who that identity belongs to. It's frustrating. Also, for support, it means that if you have a user trying to log into an application, they may call the help desk and say, oh, I can't log in, or they don't remember which account has been granted permissions to log in the application. Oh, are you using this account? Oh, no, that's not the one that you were assigned. Try using this other account. Oh, well, I haven't used that one in 30 days. I need to reset my password now. It's very frustrating experience for the end user. So it's not a good fit. I think Adam Dawes said it best in his keynote yesterday. He said to fear the calories on duplicate accounts, the empty calories on duplicate accounts. Those accounts are just there for that application. Okay, but is it really necessary? Are we getting anything out of it? Not really, right? End users certainly don't like it. So what we saw was that we had these workarounds in place. It's a frustrating end user experience. It's not one that we really want to manage either. We want to get to the point where we have a single account for a user that can access any application they need to, whether that's federated or LDAP or binding directly. That's what we want. That's best for the end user. That's best for the identity management professional. So let me explain a little bit more about what we did when we implemented Radiant 1. So again, I borrowed this from Radiant, but it does depict exactly what our environment looked like. Several Active Directory domains. We wanted to merge them specifically for LAP applications that can only use users and groups under a single root. We wanted to merge all of our users and all of our groups into a single view so that an application points at one view and can see all users no matter where they are. This solves the problem of you have to have an account in this domain specifically to access X application. It just kind of goes away. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's on the right. That's what we ended up implementing. Our most generic use case that's going to probably meet the requirements for at least half our applications. That was one view. Normalizing the data and pulling it together, that was one thing. But once that was done, that pays off dividends for every additional application that you integrate. So I'll explain a little more about how we customize it and what made sense for us, or examples of things that you could use in your environment. So what we saw was there's huge flexibility at the directory layer when you put something like Radiant 1 in place. So there's a feature in Radiant 1 called computed attributes. You can create attributes based on values of other attributes. So a really good example was instead of using something like a really weird search OID to determine if a user is enabled or not, you can create an enabled attribute. And then the applications, they just look to say, oh, they do a search and they say, oh, is this enabled true or is it false? That's really simple for everyone to understand. And if they're going back through their application later, they say, oh yeah, it's really clear. I'm looking for users maybe in this division or this department, and they must be enabled. Easy. They're not going to the directory team to say, what exactly is this again? I don't really remember it. And really what they're doing is they're copy and pasting from somewhere else, and who really knows what that's going to do. Something that was really neat in our case is we mapped, I mentioned before, users in one domain need to access accounts or access, they're a member of groups in other domains. So cross-forest mapping of group memberships. And you can't see that in LDAP, right? If you're looking directly at an LDAP directory for that information, or you're looking at Active Directory as an LDAP directory, you'll see foreign security principles instead, which essentially is like a pointer to another forest or another domain that says, really I mean this user over here. We leverage those foreign security principles to translate that into the actual object, so that if you look at that group, it now has the full users, not just things that are the foreign security principles in that domain or just the users in that domain, but it has all users from all domains, more accurately representing what Active Directory would look like to a native Active Directory enabled application. It also means that when you go looking for a user's member of, you now see not just their direct group membership in that domain, you see their group membership across all domains you've integrated with in this way. That was really, really powerful for us. It also means that you stop having to need specific groups, specific domain local groups just to do foreign security principle mappings. What we also saw when we implemented this was that we get a huge amount of flexibility at the directory layer specifically for mergers and acquisitions. We can pull a new directory in, and now every application that we've said, maybe using the common view, they now immediately have access and can authenticate and authorize users from that directory. That's really, really powerful. You spend a few minutes setting up new directories, but you're integrating it into this already existing structure, and the work is done for you. Really, not just for you, but for the consuming applications. They don't need to, oh, hey, I know you have these 2 directories configured, but could you go add a 3rd one and just let us know when it's done? And by the way, we're waiting on you to complete this merger. No big deal. You do that once, and then everything that's consuming that view can benefit from it. You can also take in information. I know we're talking about Active Directory today, but you can take in information from non-Active Directory sources. You want to take it from a SQL database, or you want to pull it from an HR source, like we use Workday. I could pull directly from Workday and add those attributes into that existing view so that applications that, instead of maybe requiring something to sync to Active Directory, it's just the data's already there because you're pulling it directly from the sources. And the last one that I mentioned was that in Active Directory, if you're, even for LDAP, you can bind with a user principal name or a SAM account name, and that isn't typical of LDAP server. So we did make it a little bit easier. So instead of having to require a full DN for the users, we remap that. We do a lookup when they attempt to log in, and we say, oh yeah, I see you're this long DN over here. The user or the consuming application never knows about it, and they don't care because it's similar to the functionality they would get if they were using Active Directory natively. So that was for the identity stuff. We saw additional benefits even beyond the identity stuff. We got this in place and we said, okay, wow, that's really neat. It's fairly simple to set up. What about this thing over here? So we saw that we have immense performance benefits, both for the consuming application, so they're getting their results faster, but also for the backends. We don't see, obviously, requests going to the backends as much because we're using this cached view. And also, we can now tell applications, yeah, you can use really, really complex queries and we don't need to scale the backends to allow that to happen, to have the extra capacity. It's not necessary because we can use this cached view instead. What was really neat, especially for our developers, was being able to take that information in that common view and expose it via a bunch of different protocols. So no, you don't need to learn LDAP. You don't need to learn how to do an ADSI search, right? We can expose it to you via REST or via SCIM for provisioning, or even SQL if you want. If that's your flavor, you can use it here. So that's something that's going to be really interesting going forward, enabling applications. Let's say we federate user authentication and then allow authorization based off of a REST call to traditionally Active Directory data. I think that's really, really powerful. So I'll stop here and I'll have some time for questions if there are any, or if not, we can talk later. Correct.
What did that buy you, and where did you still have challenges even after you did that?
So the question was around, did you look at trust, establishing trust across domains, and what did you get from that, and then what did you still need to help solve your identity problems? I think is where you're going with that. So trusts work really well for native Microsoft applications that understand Active Directory, and you have groups set up properly to maintain that relationship, and they know, yes, I trust this domain, I can walk the forest trees and enumerate those foreign security principles. That's not always the case. We found Microsoft applications that integrate with Active Directory, but can't enumerate other domains or can't enumerate forest trusts. So in that case, it's the equivalent of having an application pointed at a single LDAP server, which says a single tree, which doesn't give you the benefit of actually having trusts in place. So, we go through the process where we can to make sure that we have our groups mapped properly and whatever, but some applications just don't support it. So we have to go back to leveraging something like Radiant instead, because we already know that functionality exists and it's in place. We say, oh, you know what, just point here and it'll handle everything for you.
And I'd love if you could just kind of talk about what you're seeing from your application owners and developers in terms of REST as an example, right? Why don't they want to consume LDAP? What do they see as the advantages of REST? How much of that is happening in their environment?
So the question was, talk a little bit more about how we're leveraging REST versus why use REST over something like LDAP or ADSI. I think it really comes down to So leveraging standards, especially web standards. We want to take the data we already have. It's not like we need to keep this secret, right? We want to allow everyone to consume whatever they need to consume if they're authorized to consume it. And for native web applications, they don't want to make sure that, okay, do I have this firewall port open? Can I make this the specific LDAP call? LDAP, really? I mean, it wasn't invented 20 years ago, whatever. Do I really need to find a library that does that? Do I need to wait to make sure that all happens? Why can't I just federate with you? Oh, because I don't have all the attributes. Okay. Well, can I call something else to get those attributes? Yeah, sure. We'll authorize you, or we'll authenticate you with single sign-on. Maybe you get an OAuth token, and then hey, you take that OAuth token and you can go query whatever attributes you want. Maybe we don't really include all of the users member of groups, for example, in that token. It's just too large. So later on, they can come back and say, oh, hey, actually, I know I just logged this user in, but I need all their group information, or I need it specifically for my application, right? We can build application-specific views that take that data and say, this is just the users that are authorized to log in your application. These are just the groups you care about. And if you ask for a member of for that user who's already logged in, we're just going to give you the roles, really, the roles you care about now, instead of the 120 groups that user is in. You have to parse through all of them and figure out what you need.
So is this a way for you guys to kind of avoid token bloat by giving the user only by the application with those groups or roles that they care about?
Yeah, completely avoiding token bloat in this case, right? We'll move away from absolutely requiring Kerberos to get all that information, and we can say, still use single sign-on. The functionality is still there, leveraging OAuth or Omni Connect, but you can still pull all the information you need. And in some cases, we can build, when I say application-specific views, we'll pull in data from their sources just for that application, so they have exactly what they need instead of going to multiple different data sources to get what they need. Yeah.
So from an A perspective, can you talk about what your playbook is? Right?
What are the steps we take when we decide to acquire a new company?
Not just from your perspective, but from a network perspective, what has to be first?
Okay, so let's go look at this slide. So the question was, if you were to go through, can you walk through your steps for what you would go through for a new merger or acquisition, and how you integrate it into this ecosystem? I think it's what you're getting at. Okay. So network-wise, you could do, if you leveraging this system, you do something like you need to make sure that you at a minimum have LDAP connectivity between Radiant 1 and then whatever directory you're going to consume, right? So maybe no overlapping IP space, or if you do, then you're using a NAT, right? Assuming firewall rules are in place and you can access everything over LDAP, right? Then the next thing would be getting credentials in that remote system, right? It's still using LDAP in the back end, right? We're making it easier for our consumers. So LDAP connectivity, account that has credentials, right, to do whatever operations you expect to do. If that's just a read, so you can authorize and authenticate people, or read and bind, or if you're writing back things, right, you need those permissions. And then after that, we build it. I talked about the customizations we did, where we added the enabled attribute, computed attributes, did cross-forest mapping. We build that view, right, for that specific directory, whatever that looks like for our combined view. And then we bring it into our main view, and then we recache everything. And now all applications that look at that view now suddenly have that data. So that, if you need more information, I think let's talk afterwards. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Nope. Oh, again, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So you're talking user identity. Do you do anything from like a machine, domain join machines over here that might need to access resources that are on your computer or anything?
So the question was around, do you leverage machine identities to access this service, to pull this information, or something else?
So, in an acquisition, you've got
So the question was around, for those machine identities, is there anything that, that Radiant does where you could make it appear so that those machine identities existed in your other domain? So you, in terms of like Active Directory, no, right? It's not like a migration tool, right? But what you could do is at least allow those identities to exist. So all the consuming applications can now see those identities. It's not going to, I'm sure you could do something where you sync an identity from one to another, but it may not give you exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for like a shadow account, right? I don't think that's something you're gonna see, but it's an interesting use case. I haven't run through that before. If no other questions, I'll be down front and talk about it in a few minutes. Thanks.